Hello everybody. So now we're in chapter 17. This is the endocrine system. And we've talked about one messenger system known as the nervous system. We just finished that one up actually. The nervous system uses neurotransmitters that allow us to send electrical impulses from one cell to another cell. This is a very fast acting messenger system, but typically, this system does not continue for a long period of time, and a lot of times we adapt to the responses very quickly. The second messenger system that we're going to talk about now is called the endocrine system. This is a slower acting messenger system, but it also is slower to adapt. The response can be widespread through multiple organs, and the reaction lasts for a very long time. So we have a lot of commonalities, but there are some differences as well. So here we have a figure from your textbook. Here's a neuron, and here's the endocrine structure. Neurons themselves are cells that send electrical impulses to the neuron axon, end bulbs, and neurotransmitters are released that send signals to the next cells, which causes another electrical impulse. Endocrine glands secrete endocrine hormones into the blood, and then the blood circulates the hormone to all of their target cells. There are a lot of differences as well. So here's our nervous system, here's our endocrine system. The nervous system is going to be composed of the brain and spinal cord as our CNS, and then all the peripheral nerves outside of the spinal cord and brain as our PNS. The the endocrine system contains the hypothalamus, which is actually a portion of the nervous system as well, and then all of these glands. We also have a lot of non-endocrine structures that have endocrine functions, including testes, ovaries, our skin, our heart, our lungs, all produce some hormones. So here you can see the actual endocrine organs on this side, and on this side we see non-endocrine organs that have endocrine function. So the endocrine system, when you think of the endocrine system, most people think of metabolism, which is a good thing. Metabolism is what allows us to build up or break down molecules, allows us to reincorporate broken down substances into our cells and take those structures and then build stuff up when we need them. Metabolism helps us to maintain homeostasis. So the endocrine system contains endocrine glands that produce and secrete hormones, and we have target cells all throughout the body that respond to those hormones. This is a figure that's just blown up. The same figure shows the endocrine glands, and then the non-endocrine organs that have endocrine cells that produce hormones. So major functions of the endocrine system: maintaining blood composition and volume. So our endocrine system helps to control blood pressure by increasing or decreasing the amount of fluid in our blood. So that composition and volume. It helps to control reproductive activities. So not only does the endocrine system activate our secondary sexual characteristics at puberty, but it also activates the production of sperm and egg, which is what we need for fertilization to occur. regulates growth and development. So all of our cells are regulated by the endocrine system. Growth of bone, growth or production of blood is controlled by endocrine responses. Controlling digestive processes, so we have endocrine hormones that are released that will activate the rumbling of our stomach or the production of certain proteins that will break stuff down. We have endocrine cells that are either found within other tissues, or we have actual endocrine organs that contain only endocrine structures. And then these hormones have to have a blood supply, or these, I guess, the endocrine cells have to have a blood supply that they can secrete their hormones in. So these are the actual endocrine organs that we'll talk about. And then we have a lot of non-endocrine organs that have endocrine function, and we will talk about some of these, most of these in different chapters. So the endocrine system is controlled through either hormonal activity, humoral activity, or nervous activity. It depends on what stimulation occurs. So hormonal stimulation is one of the most common stimulations. And here we can see the hypothalamus, which would be way up here. Actually, you don't see the hypothalamus on here. It's in this area. You see the pituitary gland mainly. The hypothalamus, which controls all of our endocrine organs, can activate the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary gland then produces hormones like thyroid stimulating hormone that stimulates the thyroid gland. So it's a hormone that stimulates another endocrine gland to produce its hormone. So when it stimulates the thyroid gland produces thyroid hormone. So thyroid stimulating hormone is known as a tropic hormone. Tropic hormones are hormones produced by one endocrine gland that stimulate another endocrine gland to secrete their hormones. Humoral stimulation occurs when blood ion levels change. And so the change in blood ion levels, or blood levels of ions or glucose, whatever, when they change, it stimulates the endocrine organ to produce hormones. In this case, the pancreas, which is not an endocrine complete organ, it actually has both endocrine and exocrine functions. So it acts as a digestive organ, but it has a structure in it known as the islets of Langerhans that have hormone cells, hormone-producing cells. And one of those hormone-producing cells is known as the beta cells that produce insulin. So when our blood glucose levels increase, because maybe we've eaten 2 or 3 donuts, then insulin is going to be produced and released into the blood, and the insulin acts on cells of our body, including our liver and muscles, and tells those cells to take in glucose and build up glycogen storage. The third stimulation is through nervous impulses. So this you see with the adrenal gland. And you remember us talking about sympathetic and parasympathetic systems last semester? Well, here we see the hypothalamus stimulating the adrenal medulla during sympathetic activity. So when we enter the sympathetic state, the hypothalamus sends a signal to the adrenal medulla. The adrenal medulla releases norepinephrine and epinephrine, which stimulates our sympathetic activities. So increased heart rate, increased breathing, increased awareness of our surroundings, so that we can either fight or flee, depending on what's going on. We can also classify hormones in 3 different groups. So we have steroid hormones, protein hormones, and then biogenic amines. Protein and biogenic amines are typically water-soluble hormones. Steroid hormones are lipid-soluble. And so here we can see all 3. The most common type of hormone is the protein hormone. Protein hormones consist of multiple amino acids that produce polypeptide. So peptide bonds producing these long polypeptides. Biogenic amines typically are individual amino acids that have been modified, and most are water soluble, with the exception of thyroid hormone, which is not water soluble, it's lipid soluble. And then we have steroid hormones, which are formed from cholesterol. So here's an example of a steroid hormone, cortisol. Another example would be estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Those are all lipid soluble hormones. Depending on if you are lipid soluble or water soluble, you're going to be able to move through the blood differently. Water soluble hormones can enter the blood and they dissolve immediately because our blood plasma is composed mainly of water. Lipid soluble hormones can't do that. So when you have water soluble hormones, they're going to freely move in the blood, and then once they find their target cell, they move out and they bind to the surface of the cell on the receptor. Lipid-soluble hormones have to bind to a protein carrier, so some type of a protein in the blood that allows the lipid-soluble hormones to be transported in the blood. Because they're lipid-soluble, they can't dissolve in the fluid. Once they reach their target cell, though, they're going to unbind from the protein and move directly in through the plasma membrane. They're lipid soluble. The plasma membrane allows small nonpolar molecules to enter through, and then the lipid soluble protein, or lipid soluble hormone can then activate the changes within the cell, because it's going to bind inside the cell. So targets, the receptors, are going to be found throughout the body. You don't just have one, like we have one neuron that innervates a cell. We might have one hormone that activates multiple cells on multiple organs to change in function. Lipid-soluble hormones are going to have their target receptors inside the cell. Water-soluble hormones, and I can go to this one. No, let me go to, hold on. There you go. Water-soluble hormones are going to bind to the surface of the cell membrane, and they're going to activate a second messenger. So hold on 1 second. I'm going to actually stop this recording, and then we're going to see both lipid-soluble activity and water-soluble activity in our next recording. Okay? See ya.